What's up, everybody? Welcome back. You all may have seen my video yesterday talking about the Padme Amidala team against Darth Revan and Darth Malak, how keeping them slow and buffing up their health really makes them a consistent counter to that team. But today, I want to talk to you guys a little bit more about throwing Shaak Ti onto that team. I actually kind of used her in place of Ahsoka on the team, and I was getting incredibly consistent results. Somewhere in the range of winning about 90% of the time, especially against the top Darth Revan team on my shard, talking speeds of like 330 on Revan, 315 on Malak, and 308 on Bassa. It's a very fast Darth Revan team, and I was winning with throwing Shaak Ti on there pretty much all the time, but I was losing some characters, and that's the drawback here, is that it wins incredibly consistently, but I could pretty much never keep General Kenobi alive. So if you're going to use this for Territory Wars, expect this team to be about 18 or 19 points for you on a one-shot attempt against Darth Revan, which sounds great on paper. And, you know, that's something to consider, is that with throwing Shaak Ti onto the team, it actually becomes incredibly consistent. So I do recommend that. Now, in terms of the mods on her, you guys think I'm going to be running her super fast. That is not the case. She's only at 286 speed, about 100 bonus speed on her. Remember, at Gear 12 Plus, she is at a base speed of 179, which is the second fastest character in the game. So you could easily take her above 300 speed with speed mods on her and make her go faster than anyone on the opposing team, but I didn't really want to do that because that requires putting those top end speed mods on her, taking those away from Darth Revan. So I want to do something a little bit different here, and even with her running at a slower speed of like 280, still getting those results. So that, I think, is very, very impressive. So the team lineup is going to be Padme with C-3PO, Anakin, General Kenobi, and Shaak Ti. So you do have these 5 characters you're going to be running. We'll take out Ahsoka and put Shaak Ti in her place. So that is the overall team composition, and it actually works pretty well, because once you get the Zeta on Shaak Ti, and you will need the Zeta for her on this with her unique heightened reflexes, whenever she takes damage, she gains retribution for 2 turns at the end of that turn. There's a lot of AoE openers with a Darth Revan team, so what's going to happen is that she's pretty much going to do the work for you. She'll constantly counter, she'll dispel the buffs on the opposing target, because that's what her basic does, dispels buffs on the target enemy, and then gives your team offense up. And that ties back into C-3PO with his intermediary ability, where whenever a Galactic Republic ally gains a different non-unique buff, they gain 15% protection up for 2 turns. So she's constantly handing out offense up, which means she's constantly giving that protection up to your team. That is pretty significant. So you do have that with her, and you know, she also is able to call targeted assist. You can also use her assault team ability here, which dispels all debuffs from your allies and then gives that target a certain buff based on who they are. Obviously, you're usually going to target General Kenobi with this because it gives him taunt and crit immunity, but you can then use her training exercises to call a target assist with Anakin and have him get more chances to call buff and heal immunity on someone like Darth Malak, because that's pretty important. You got to make sure you get that healing immunity on Darth Malak to make sure he's not constantly healing back. So overall, I have to say I do like her in this team better than Ahsoka. So let's go ahead and dive into the footage, and let's talk about the strategy for this team. So as the battle starts, you will obviously be getting a lot of debuffs on your team, and that is going to happen. That is intended, because you want to get all those debuffs from the enemy team, like Bastila, HK-47, Darth Revan, Darth Malak, all the debuffs on the enemy team. You want them to go ahead and get on yours so that you can use Padme's ability to flip those and then give your team a lot of protection up. And remember, protection up is what fuels a lot of damage for your team, because that gets converted to courage, and they do max health stacks of damage, and pretty much you can one-shot a lot of the enemy team if you have plenty of stacks of courage. So that's important. In terms of what I'm using Shaak Ti here for, I'm using her for 2 things: to get taunt and crit immunity on General Kenobi, and then use her targeted assist ability with Anakin to get buff immunity and heal immunity on Malak if necessary. But I can also use that as an emergency heal if I need to, in case General Kenobi is getting low on health and I need to make sure he doesn't die. But also keep in mind, all unique buffs that get thrown onto your team, like offense up, the crit immunity, the taunt, anything like that, that will give stacks of protection up at the same time, thanks to C-3PO. So when you're fighting these Darth Revan and Darth Malak teams, you do have to be very strategic about it. This one, where I fought the top team on my shard, I kind of went about it very sloppy, was still trying to get some things nailed down, and I could have honestly done better, and that is something that I've learned very quickly. This was one of my earlier fights. I just wanted to see what I could do, and I was very impressed with the fact that I was able to come away with consistent wins like this. I fought him 3 or 4 times in a row, and every time I came away with a win, which I think is the most impressive thing here. So if you can get this team nailed down, use the abilities at the right time, and use Shaak Ti's target assist both to get heal and immunity with Anakin onto Darth Malak, and also as an emergency heal against General Kenobi, you can actually have a pretty good time for this team. Now, in terms of keeping Shaak Ti fast or slow, honestly, either one works. If you do get her faster than the opposing Darth Revan, your tactics should change up a little bit. I still try to run this team the same way as I did before, but she's not, she kind of goes against the grain there with Padme, and that I think is the most important thing, is if you're going to be running a super fast Shaak Ti, your tactics are going to have to change, and she was also then going to be able to take away debuffs from getting on your team at the same time. You know, General Kenobi is able to get a lot of debuffs on him, but once you get that taunt and crit immunity on him, it throws protection up from C-3PO, which then prevents him from getting certain debuffs on him, and then Padme can't flip that, and then that actually reduces the amount of protection up your team is going to get. So that's something very important to note here, and that is why I recommend running Shaak Ti at a slower speed here. Like I was running her around the 280 range, and I was stacking up her health, just like everybody else on this team. I cannot emphasize that enough. Stack up the health on this team, because if you don't do that, you're going to have a very rough time, and I know that kind of goes against the grain here, because the more max health on your team, the more Malak can drain, and that's why it's so important to make sure you land that heal and immunity with Anakin. You don't have to stack potency on him, because of the ferocity on the enemy team. It's really going to negate any tenacity they have, so you have to make sure that you land the heal and immunity, and that is why I like Shaak Ti here, because you get more chances to call Anakin to assist and get that heal and immunity on Malak at the same time. Now, of course, Ahsoka does work as well, but she assists quite a bit, and this can actually lead to some problems with Sith Marauder, which unfortunately, no one on my shard runs Sith Marauder, so I cannot get this footage, but the Sith Marauder versions of this team, where they have Marauder instead of Sith Trooper, are much more difficult on defense, and Ahsoka is actually a bit of a liability here, because she's constantly assisting, which is driving up the turn meter on Sith Marauder, and his saber throw can deal some really nasty damage when he has those stacks of ferocity built up. So that is why I recommend Shaak Ti, especially for those kinds of compositions, because you can control her a lot more than you can Ahsoka. The Zaydan Ahsoka just constantly calls her to assist, which gives 20% turn meter to Sith Marauder anytime an enemy attacks out of turn. With Shaak Ti, you will get a bunch of counters at the start of the match, which you guys have seen by now, but those are very regulated because they're just based on AoE attacks from the enemy team. There's a lot of them at the opening, but outside of that, it's a lot easier for you to control how often she attacks out of turn. So she works great overall, especially against those Sith Marauder comps, which cannot be stated enough, and just how important that is. And that's why I like her more than Ahsoka. I know Ahsoka is great in this team. She has a one-shot ability that deals a ton of damage, and she can constantly dispel buffs from the enemy team, and then cleanse debuffs from your team. But you also get that in a way with Shaak Ti because of her basic, which cleanses buffs from the enemy team, but then gives you that offense up buff, which number one gives you more damage on your team, and number two gives another stack of protection up from C-3PO. And that I think is another thing that I like her over Ahsoka here. So in terms of running which one I prefer, obviously I prefer Shaak Ti, but you know, if you are running her at lower star counts, it gets kind of iffy. It's not exactly one that she's kind of squishy until you start getting her Gear 12 stuff on her, and you can't do that until you get her to 7 stars, and she gets a lot of bonus health at Gear 12, so that is something to consider as well. So I do recommend that if you do not have Shaak Ti geared up, or have her at a higher star count, I still recommend you run Ahsoka. But once you get Shaak Ti, if you don't have your clones as well, I mean, obviously I'm going to be running Shaak Ti a lot with my clones probably, but at the same time, if you don't have your clones geared up and you're not really looking to run clones, I would rather you prefer, I would have to prefer running Shaak Ti on the Padme team over anything else. So that is gonna be it for this video, guys. Let me know down in the comments, what do you guys think? I know a lot of people have been asking about Padme and Shaak Ti, how well Shaak Ti works on this team. I'm glad to say that I am very happy with her on the Padme team and the results that I'm getting with her. So let me know down in the comments, what do you guys think? As always, guys, thank you guys so much for watching. Feel free to like, share, and subscribe. I will talk to you guys later.